Hello everyone, it's me, Lola Javon, back with another edition of the weekly vlog, which is the video version of my written blog that you can find over at www.lolajavon.com. Today, we're talking about this one, which is called Sustainable Waiting. It's 26 by 32 by 1 inch. It is unframed, but hanging wire on the back, so it's ready to hang. This is oil on linen canvas. Who would have guessed it possible that waiting is sustainable, a place with its own harvest? And that's an excerpt of a poem by Kay Ryan. My relationship with patience has been, for the most part, adversarial. Patience interfered with productivity, with meeting metrics, with getting things done. And patience made it more likely that I would recognize the monstrousness all around me, so I was always in a hurry. But when the life that I had so fiercely and so energetically cultivated fell to pieces, some years ago, I thought, maybe I could slow down. And so I left space. I embraced unknowns. I waited to see what would happen if I did, well, nothing. Nothing at all. And those empty spaces in my life, in my career, in my home, in conversations, in love, in friendships, they began to slowly and magically fill up with just the right people and things, including my husband, who is the emperor of positive procrastination and the grand wizard of patience. From him, I learned how waiting to take action sometimes allows everything to resolve on its own. As in life, it is in art. I recall the incredible artist Stan Kurth, and you should give him a Google, saying something like, art is 50% doing and the other 50% just looking. I began to slow down and look at the art of others, at my own art, at dance, at sculpture, at whittling, at metalwork, at fiber art, just looking, which requires patience, especially when looking at things I may not appreciate and asking questions like, why? Why do people like this? Why don't I like it? When I fell into oil painting a few years ago, the brakes were put on with a grinding, can you hear them? The brakes on the tracks? Train brakes, screeching and scraping metal on metal. Halt! Oil painting takes time. It takes patience, endless, exhausting patience, layers upon layers, and no hurrying that drying time with a hairdryer. No, sir. Slow curing, slow hardening, slow. Something happened while I was waiting, impatiently at first, of course. I began to see what Kurth meant when I looked, really looked, at the art just sitting around, just drying, the nerve, doing nothing but drying. I began to see parts of each piece that were way better than I thought, and also, ouch, parts that were way worse. I began to ask questions of the art and to offer it the time to give me an answer. And sometimes it needs a lot of time. Now, there are at least half a dozen pieces in process at all times in the studio. Each one gets as much time as it needs to tell me what's next. And the more I look and listen, the more easily those answers come. And a big shout out to Avery Caswell, the author of the book Dry Spell, and there's a link in the blog, and I'll put a link in the comments, for suggesting this topic for the blog. Thanks, Avery. Let's talk about the art. How long did this piece take? Well, 3 years? Because the underpainting, a figurative piece, is the entire reason for the texture in this piece. I turned the figurative piece upside down and stared at it for months. What did it want to be? I didn't like it how it was. Something maybe pastoral, maybe Oregon hills, maybe sunset, maybe wildfires. Maybe all of these things. With the upside-down painting in place on the easel, I roughed in some big shapes with a wet, paint-laden brush, and then broad strokes of the main colors just to kind of set the piece and set those shapes, and then drying and looking and looking. A small brush to rough in the shapes of buildings and this meandering path. More drawing. A palette knife to create hard edges for the rolling hills. A wide brush for tree shapes. More drawing. 80 million layers of sky. A palette knife to further refine trees without becoming precious or overly detailed. More layers of color on the hills, dragging lavender with the knife, dragging orange with the knife, dragging darks across the rolling hills to create more and more texture and to soften those hard edges that I created earlier on. Drawing, drawing, drawing. Refining the buildings and the path without getting too precious about that. A sky ablaze on the far horizon. Is it sunset? Is it wildfire? More drawing time. Varnish. Voila. And just a reminder, you can still order Monstrous, though you can't get the book by itself anymore. Those are sold out. You can get it with your Fairy Tale Survival Kit. Links in the show notes, links in the comments. Thanks to everyone who's ordered it already, and I hope you will grab your kit before it sells out. Thanks for spending time with me this week, and remember, go to www.lolajavon.com for more art, more malarkey, some monsters, and I don't know, maybe a blog or two. We'll see you next week. Bye.